Sure.
I got it,
Okay.
finally. Okay.
Yes. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
We're just going to take a couple of minutes to let everybody join. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Okay. Okay. Hello. See some new people joining. All right. Give it another minute or so and then we'll get started. All right, so welcome everybody. I'm Kathleen. I'm with the Clinton River Watershed Council. I am just going to do some brief introductions for Katie and Laura, and I'm going to let them take it away. So thank you for joining us tonight. This is Stormwater 101. Some logistics that I'm going to go over while Katie is presenting. Could you just make sure that you're muted? And you can leave your camera on or off. It doesn't really matter, but make sure that you are muted so that we don't have any distractions. If you have any questions, just pop them into the chat. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a little message icon, and you could put anything in the chat, and Laura's going to be here as acting kind of as a moderator. So she'll be able to answer your questions during the presentation, and then if they can be answered, and then we'll also be able to answer a lot of those questions at the end of the presentation. And then once Katie is sharing her screen, if you go into the corner where it says view, and you can actually choose speaker view side by side, but it's really your preference on what you like to see, but it's a way to easily see the slides and then the speaker, but really your preference. And if you have questions about that, you can raise your hand or let me know. But as if you were to do it right now, you can go into the top right corner, hit view, side by side speaker, and that way you just see the slides and you see the speaker. So with that, if anybody doesn't have any specific questions related to the logistics, I will introduce Katie and Laura. So Katie Yates is our watershed program specialist. She's been with us for over almost 3 years now, which is awesome. She does great work. She's going to be your presenter today. She helps out with our stormwater education program, our stewardship events, Adopt-A-Stream, our citizen science programs, a lot of our programs, as well as some of our water quality monitoring and ecology programs. And then we have Laura Gruzwalski, who is a consultant for DLZ, and she also works with the City of Rochester. So this presentation is co-hosted by the City of Rochester. and she's going to be here today, sort of moderating the chat and helping you guys move through this smoothly. And so with that, I don't think we have to go over anything else. So go ahead and take it away, Katie.
Laura, did you have anything to add before we get started?
Yeah, just real quickly, on behalf of the City of Rochester, I'd just like to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to participate in our virtual webinar and learning how you can have an impact on our watershed and our community. I'd like to thank Katie Yates, Katie Sexton, and all the tremendous staff at the Clinton River Watershed Council for the help in putting this webinar together and for all their support with the City of Rochester over the years. The City of Rochester is unique in that it has two major river systems that run through it. The Paint Creek flows southeast and then merges with the Clinton River on the southern end of the city. The Paint Creek is one of only two designated trout streams in Oakland County, making Rochester a very popular destination for fishermen and women. The City of Rochester is committed to protecting and enhancing our waterways. We host volunteer cleanup events each fall. We provide stormwater education to our residents and the general public through our website, newsletters, exhibits at City Hall, and events like this one today. We have also spearheaded stream bank stabilization, aquatic habitat improvement, and green infrastructure projects on our properties, and improved recreational opportunities on our rivers. We all play a part in keeping our rivers, lakes, and streams clean, and we appreciate your interest and your commitment to our waterways. Thank you. So with that, I'll head it over back to Katie.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate it. And thanks, Kathleen. Welcome, everybody. This is Stormwater 101, presented by the Clinton River Watershed Council and Laura Kozwowski, DLC, on behalf of Rochester Hills. So again, as Kathleen said, my name is Katie Yates. I'm the Watershed Program Specialist at the Clinton River Watershed Council. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what the Clinton River Watershed Council is, our watershed as a whole, stormwater pollution, and most importantly, how we can help. Okay, so it all started 45 years ago. The Clinton River and other rivers in the United States and around the world were in trouble. It was used kind of as a dumping ground. If you're able to discern what's going on in these pictures, there's cars and trash, and people, you know, they didn't really know the value of clean water, or they did know the value of clean water, but you know, the regulations hadn't been put in place to obtain that yet. So it was kind of accumulating over a long period of time, and everything was coming to a head. So in 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed, and this stopped a lot of industry pollution, point source pollution. It regulated what was getting discharged to our waterways. And the Clinton River Watershed Council was established at the same time. And it was made up of local governments and wastewater treatment plants. So today we are actually a local nonprofit. We obtained nonprofit status in the 90s, and we work to protect, enhance, and celebrate the Clinton River, its watershed, and its.
Katie, sorry to interrupt, but some of us we can hear you, but it sounds a little muffled. Maybe get a little bit closer to your screen.
Okay. Is that better?
That is better. Thank you very much.
Thanks for telling me. Sorry, guys. All right. So if I get quiet again, just hop on and let me know.
Okay.
So we're a nonprofit, so we need funding, and the way that we get funded is through memberships, private contributions, and grants. And we have 3 program areas that we focus on to get our message across and to be effective in our mission. The first is education, so that's things like today. Stewardship, we host cleanups and help with native plantings, things like that. And watershed management, so we help monitor stream projects among other things. So let's talk a little bit locally about our watershed. This is in our watershed during warmer, nicer times. Well, first, what is a watershed? Some of you may already know this, but a watershed is an area of land where all of the water drains into a common body of water. A lot of times that's a river, sometimes it's a lake, sometimes it's the ocean. And then most importantly, a watershed is not divided up by like city divides or state lines or even countries. It has to do with the topography of the land. And even though here in Southeast Michigan we're pretty flat, it's undetectable, but it is, a watershed is almost shaped a little bit like a bowl, as you can see in this slide here. If it will light up red for me. There you go. So there's a topographic divide. So the area is a little bit higher around the edges, creating kind of a bowl, and the water all runs off into the same area. And in our case, that's the Clinton River. The important thing to remember is that no matter where you live in a watershed. You could live in a desert, you're still in a watershed. You can live in Antarctica, you're still in a watershed. The water will go somewhere. We live in a very special area. We have 1/5 of the world's fresh water, and we have 84% of North America's fresh water. So it's substantial. This is a very unique place, and it's worthy of protection and stewardship. Right here is a map of all of the watersheds in Michigan. Ours is where the heart is. So, all right, here's our watershed. This is the Clinton River watershed. We cover 4 counties, 63 communities, and 760 square miles. So just think of this, all of this land, all of the water that runs on that land goes into the Clinton River, and the Clinton River is 81.5 miles, and that makes its way out to Lake St. Clair. So that's a pretty large area of land. We're not the largest watershed in Michigan, but we do have 1.5 million people. So we're a very populated watershed. So we'll talk a little bit about historical water quality problems. Again, before the Clean Water Act, there was lack of policy, and this kind of let polluters pollute unregulated industrial waste. Sediments were contaminated, and contaminated sediments get washed into the water. People were dumping, and development of our cities and homes and roads and all of that contributes to wetland loss and also shoreline hardening. So again, the Clean Water Act in 1972 was established, and that handled many point source polluters and held businesses and industries more accountable for their actions. So now we still have some issues. One of the issues is bacterial contamination. This can be from septic systems, combined sewer overflows. It can be from animal waste. I don't know if anybody goes out to Lake St. Clair Metro Park, but sometimes the beaches close there because of bacterial contamination. Contaminated sediments. So little pieces of dirt or sediment, they are a good vehicle for chemicals such as nitrogen and phosphorus. So nitrogen and phosphorus can attach themselves to that sediment particle, and when it rains, it's the perfect way to make it out to our water. Flooding happens because of the increased water flow when it all flows over impervious surfaces such as driveways, sidewalks, parking lots. You get a heavy influx of water. But the biggest source of pollution in the watershed is stormwater pollution. So what is stormwater pollution? First, let's think about how rainfall falls on natural surfaces. So what happens in nature when it rains? The rain collects on leaves, it collects on plants and grasses, and then it is allowed to percolate down into the soil. And as it slowly goes down into the soil, roots from all those plants and trees can soak some of it up. And some of it doesn't get soaked up. It keeps making its way down to groundwater, and then groundwater eventually makes its way out to our surface waters. And this process takes a long time. It's not quick, it's slow. Nature's good at doing things very slowly and methodically and very usefully. So our natural surfaces make very good use of this rainwater. For example, one mature tree can absorb over 4,000 gallons of stormwater a year. And native plants, like the ones you see pictured in the center here, some of those native plants can have root systems as deep as 12 feet. So that's pretty amazing. Also, as water.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you again, Katie. I don't know if anyone else is.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, it's a little bit better now. Yeah.
Okay. So as water percolates through soil, the groundwater is recharged, and eventually that groundwater makes its way out to surface waters, as you can see in the bottom right picture. So again, we talked about our watershed having more than 1.5 million people, which is a lot. And to sustain that population, there are things that are necessary. We need to have roads, we need housing, we need businesses, we need to take care of ourselves. But all of that means that we have a lot of impervious surfaces in our watershed. So imperviousness means the water is not allowed to percolate down through the soil. That cement or that blacktop or that rooftop is a barrier from the water doing what it would naturally do. So absorption is decreased and stormwater runoff is increased. So that means the water that would normally be percolating down into the soil is now running across these hard surfaces. How's that, Laura? Is that okay?
That is better. Thank you.
Okay. So impervious surfaces and vehicles on the roadways and housing and people and industry and business all contribute to stormwater pollution. So what exactly is stormwater pollution? It's non-point source pollution, which means that it can come from a number of places. We might not be able to find exactly where the source is. For example, if you have a city block, you might have half of that block fertilizing their lawn, or maybe people's cars are leaking. And so when those pollutants make it out to the waterways, we don't know whose house it came from. It's just too hard to tell. So we call it non-point source. It comes from many places. So when it rains and the water rushes across the sidewalks and the streets and the rooftops, it's picking up anything that's in its path. So maybe it's cigarette butts, maybe it's litter, maybe it's gasoline and oil that has leaked out, sediments, even grass clippings. All that's getting picked up and it's getting washed into our storm drains. And then our storm drains go straight out to a waterway. So it could be a man drain that goes into a stream, that goes into the river, and then eventually Lake St. Clair. Either way, it's not being treated on its pathway. It's making its way out there. So you might be thinking, what is the difference between wastewater and stormwater? Wastewater comes from our homes, such as our water from our sinks, our dishwashers, our washing machines, and our toilets. And it goes through the sanitary sewer system. And the sanitary sewer system heads to a wastewater treatment plant before being treated and then discharged. Stormwater, on the other hand, is water, again, that when it rains, it goes through the streets and the sidewalks, and it's directed to a storm drain. And the storm sewer system does not get treated. It goes directly out to our lakes, rivers, and streams. So in some cases, in some cities, those sanitary sewers and the storm sewers are combined. Those are called CSSs, combined sewer systems. And you might think that's good because what that means is all of the water is getting treated before it's discharged. But it's really the old way of doing things. It's expensive to treat all of that water. And then the really bad thing is that when you get an extreme rain event, the sewer system is overloaded, and then it is made to discharge partially treated or untreated wastewater to our lakes, rivers, and streams, rather than just stormwater. It's also wastewater. So that's not really a great way to do things. About the mid-century, separate sewer systems were implemented. And so that is what we talked about, where there's a separate wastewater sewer system and a separate storm drain system. And again, that way the wastewater is getting treated, but the stormwater is heading out. So you don't have that partially treated wastewater being discharged. All right, so back to runoff. Why is runoff a problem? Why is stormwater runoff a problem? Again, as it goes across roads and even grass, it can pick up animal waste, fertilizers, pesticides. Think of all the salt on the road right now. All that is eventually going to make its way out to our waterways, our lakes, rivers, and streams, roadside ditches. What it causes is sedimentation and erosion. Erosion because a heavy influx of water washes away the edges of our rivers and our lakes and our streams. And it can also cause algae blooms because you have excess nutrients from fertilizer being input into the lake. And in turn, that makes the plant life and the algae grow like crazy, which is actually a bad thing because once all of that dies off, as it decays, it actually takes oxygen from the water, and that's not great for things like fish. And also, some algae blooms are harmful and they can contaminate drinking water, as we saw in Lake Erie a few years ago. So this kind of sums up what we were just talking about. Algae blooms, contaminated drinking water, eutrophication of lakes. So that just means when all that algae dies off and the lakes are out of balance and not healthy. Sediment overload. All right, so here is a little history of stormwater management, very brief, but we're going to go through it. So when did we begin thinking about stormwater? When we begin thinking about most things, which is when it causes a problem. So back in the 1800s, they were dealing with stormwater and wastewater together in ditches. So for them, that was the best way that they were able to handle it. But this meant that you had open ditches going through your cities that were very stinky and dirty, and it was just a very dirty place to be. So people quickly realized this is not how we want to live. This is not a long-term solution. We need to figure something else out. Then came pipes. So at least it's out of sight and it's out of smell, but the water was still polluted. And what's more is that as cities got larger and more developed, they switched from using well water to using surface waters for their drinking supply. And because they were diverting their stormwater and their wastewater all out to surface waters, that caused a big problem when it came to drinking water. So then as early as the late 1800s, some cities actually began to treat their water. Some cities began to do sewage farms, which is wastewater diverted to farmland and applied topically. And that helps restore nutrients to the soil. Sand filtration and aerobic and chemical treatments were used. And today it's actually possible for wastewater to be filtered to an almost pure state. So are things good now? Not quite. We're getting there. Things are better. Again, combined sewer systems is where we were at the turn of the century. They can't handle heavy rain events. And when there is a heavy rain event, that means that some partially treated sewage is definitely getting discharged. It's expensive to treat all of the water in that way. And if anybody's interested, you can go onto Eagle's website and find a CSO, so a combined sewer overflow report for Michigan. This here is the link to the one in 2019, so you can see like where and when is this happening. But the issue with switching to separate sewer system is that it's really expensive. You have to tear up the roads. Like some cities just don't have the financial means to do this, and they just have to do the best with what they have, which is tough. But in any case, separate sewer systems are good, but you know, we can still do better. Stormwater, again, is directly discharged to surface waters along with any type of pollution that it's picking up. Too much water all at once going straight into our streams causes flooding issues. I mean, think back to what we were talking about with rainwater's natural path. So if you're in a natural area with natural surfaces, this whole process of rainwater going out to streams and lakes and rivers is a lot slower. But here in our cities, when it rains, that whole system is sped up. It's not taking very long at all for water to make it out to the waterways, and it's a large amount of water. If you think of all the roads you travel on, think of all the parking lots you come into contact with every day. Think of your sidewalk, your driveway, your roof. That's so much water that would normally be infiltrating into the soil rather than rushing as fast as it can out to surface waters. So regulations today, again, the 1972 Clean Water Act was kind of a starter for this. And then it was amended in 1987, which allowed for stormwater discharge regulations. Now people have MS4 permits, where if you are a city or sometimes a school district or a large area that discharges stormwater, you have certain regulations that must be met. One of them is education, such as this presentation today. And the EPA, state and local governments are beginning or have been implementing best management practices for stormwater. So we'll get into, how can we better manage our stormwater going forward. So where are we now? Multidisciplinary approach to stormwater management. So there's not just one solution. Again, we have existing infrastructure. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There's a lot of things that need to happen. Stormwater management is taken into consideration now during or before development, which is good. So if somebody is going to come and put in a new strip mall, in their plans, they have to say how they're going to manage all the displaced stormwater that strip mall will create. Green infrastructure can be used to slow and reduce flows, and we'll get into green infrastructure in a minute. And education is a key factor in raising awareness about stormwater pollution. So if you learn anything from this today, if you share it with your friends and neighbors and family, that's definitely a win. That's a step forward. So now we're on to the good news. We can all help. There's a few impactful actions that we can all do at home or on our own scale, whatever we're able to do. Green infrastructure, watershed-friendly landscaping, and volunteering. So what is green infrastructure? Green infrastructure helps to increase infiltration by replacing impervious surfaces with pervious and natural surfaces whenever possible. So if you have a parking lot and you're able to add in little areas of trees and native plants and direct water from the parking lot to that area. That helps to filter the stormwater from there. If you can put in a green roof, that's a pretty big one, but there are some green roofs in cities. At least you could, if you can't do it, maybe you can advocate for that in your local area. Rain gardens are something that are great on any scale. They can be small scale, they can be large scale. They can pretty much fit the needs of whatever space they're in. Bioswales, which are they're kind of like a rain garden but shaped more like a ditch. Pervious pavers, so that's at the top here where you see that diamond shape. So, you know, you have a hard surface you could park on that area, but there's also little patches of vegetation in between it. So it's like it's a 50-50, right? It's a balance between a hard surface that you need so that you can park the car or walk on, but you have a little bit of infiltration allowed. Rain barrels, and also there is a such thing as porous pavement, which is pretty interesting. So the magic of green infrastructure is that it handles water quality. So again, by adding vegetation, the water is able to be absorbed by that vegetation and then filter through the soil. So the quality is improved and the quantity is improved. So again, it slows it down and you're not having that influx of stormwater to our local waterways. So it helps with erosion and sedimentation and things like that. And it also recharges our groundwater. Having more green space with green infrastructure helps air quality. It also creates habitat for wildlife, and it's pretty nice to look at too. So it is aesthetically pleasing in your community. Okay, what about watershed-friendly landscaping at home? So even if you don't have native plants at your house and you don't have a rain garden, maybe you don't want to have a rain barrel, that's okay. There's still things you can do. Before you apply any fertilizer to your lawn, first make sure your lawn needs it. So do a soil test. And that way you can really target what your lawn needs instead of just putting a blanket fertilizer on there and just kind of, you know, not really a focused effort. You can use slow release fertilizers, and you can also use low phosphorus and nitrogen fertilizers. So there's some earth-friendly options out there. You can rake compost into your lawn. That's a natural way to add nutrients to your lawn. If you are ambitious, you could install a rain barrel. You can plant native species. Again, native plants have those deep reaching roots and they're really able to soak up stormwater and filter out some of the pollutants that it would wash off the driveways and sidewalks. And also minimize turf grass. You know, turf grass is green space, but just for comparison, the roots of turf grass, I think, are 6 inches or less. I mean, that's why we have sod and you can just roll up a lawn and then plant it. So when you think of turf grass roots compared to native plant roots, they're not really able to soak up the amount of water and help to filter out any pollutants the way that native plants are able to do that. And install a rain garden if you're feeling very ambitious. We have a program here at the Watershed Council. Maybe you have already been implementing some of these practices in your own yard and you want to see where you stand, or maybe you want to begin implementing some of these practices and you need a starting point. It's called River Safe, Lake Safe. You can go online to our website and take a survey. And it helps teach you how to incorporate best management practices for watershed health. So some of those are, you know, what we just shared on the last 2 slides. And if your yard passes, if you've been doing some of this stuff, then you'll get certified River Safe, Lake Safe. It's free, it's fun, it's educational. I would recommend that being your next step of, you know, springtime's around the corner, I hope, and could be something to look forward to. So here is a yard that's been certified River Safe, Lake Safe. They've got a bunch of native plants. Looks like it's great habitat. So you could also join us in protecting freshwaters through membership or volunteering. Some opportunities that we have are Adopt a Stream. That's a citizen science stream monitoring program. Really what you get to do is go collect bugs in the water and identify them, like the picture in the top left. And by finding out what types of bugs live in the water, you're able to know the relative health and quality of that water body. We have road stream crossings, weekly cleans, so every Wednesday from about April until November, so usually when the weather's a bit warmer, we head out to a different park in the watershed and we clean up. We get volunteers to clean up. So it's 2 hours every Wednesday. You don't have to sign up, but you can go onto our website to find out where the next location is. We have a native plant sale every year for River Day. We have Clinton Cleanup, which is in September, and that is a watershed-wide cleanup. So groups get out, and it's like a maximum impact day. And I think last year we had like 4,000 pounds of trash removed. It's amazing what people can do. And again, certify your yard river safe, lake safe, which is what we just talked about. So here we go. Adopt a Stream. There's 2 monitoring events a year. This is that citizen science stream monitoring program. We have 230 trained volunteers, 45 monitoring sites. And then we also go out, which we did this a couple weeks ago, and do a winter stonefly search. So you can believe it or not, there is a bug that hatches in the winter, and they're very good indicators of water quality. And we go count them every week. So here's some people in action, having fun. Okay, our weekly clean. Here's some weekly clean stats. 34 cleanups a year, 435 volunteers, and about 9,000 pounds of trash each year. We've been doing this for quite a while. Clinton Cleanup, as I said, we got 4,000 pounds of trash last year, 17 events across the watershed. We also have some paddles. This picture of the canoe and the guys with all the tires, those were removed from the Clinton River by them, and they paddled all those tires for a couple hours just to get them out of the water. But that's some of the legacy pollution, like we saw in that initial black and white picture of vehicles being pushed into the Clinton River. The Clinton River quality of water has definitely improved over the years, but there are some legacy pollution things, and we're working to take care of it. And there's plenty of volunteers who are happy to help, so we're pretty lucky. Here's some cleanup. Somebody found a gnome. There are, I don't know, we've found a refrigerator before, a couch, all kinds of crazy fun things, and they're out of the water now, so that's what's most important. So we have watershed events throughout the year. This year is a little different. We're not going to have the big events that we normally have, but we are reimagining some of the ways that we do things. So we will have some outdoor things going on, paddling events, presentations, and outdoor workshops. We did a bunch of outdoor workshops last year that were a lot of fun, like native seed collecting. And we will have River Day, that's in June this year. And all this information is on our website at crwc.org. So just remember, this is your home, your community, and your watershed. So do your best to take care of it. And thank you very much for your time and for listening to us today. And I think that Laura has been watching the chat, and she's going to follow up with any questions that may have come through.
Yep, I'm actually in the process of responding to one of the questions, but the very first question I thought I would save for discussion purposes because I did want to get your input. So the question is there a best practice recommended size ratio of impervious surface to green infrastructure required to do an effective job at mitigating runoff? example, a small rain garden for a large parking lot may be a feel-good exercise, but really is it effective?
Yeah, absolutely. There are formulas out there to do that. The Rouge has a great rain garden program, and I think they might have the tool that calculates this because, yeah, I mean, a lot of these things can be feel good, but you want to make sure that your effort is effective and actually doing what it's supposed to do. So there's calculators online. You can Google like rain garden calculator, and it has to do with, yes, the dimensions of the size. So like the roof of my house, I would put in those dimensions, or maybe I'm only doing it from one gutter from the roof of my house, and that gutter only takes like 50 square feet of roof space. So then I would calculate that 50 square feet and find out the exact size of my rain garden. So absolutely, yes. And before people implement, especially in cities, before anything gets implemented, it has to go through some pretty rigorous and stringent eyes and make sure that that their money is being spent effectively.
And I would like to add that every little bit does help. I think it's important to identify like where the rainwater is falling off your lawn. Like if you have a lot of grass and a lot of trees already in your lawn, you know, I think the biggest part will be your driveway. So like for instance, my driveway is on a little bit of a slope. But you know, if your driveway is primarily flat, then there may be some, you know, better opportunities to kind of connect a rain garden to that driveway and things like that. And there always is a pervious pavement option. Like there's been a lot of new technologies recently in that regard. So like, let's say, you know, your driveway is deteriorating anyway, that would be a good opportunity for you to look into putting in pervious asphalt or concrete or pavers, like Katie mentioned, you know, instead of the typical like concrete driveway. So that's an option. And I do want to point out that there's a lot of great information out there right now. Friends of the Rouge has hosted like a rain garden presentations where you can actually Washtenaw County has also, they have a pretty good program. Katie, you might know like the actual title of it or whatever, but it's like a 4 or 5 different like sessions that you participate in, and you know, you do your own soil testing or whatever, and then when you're done, you basically become like a master rain gardener. Is that what we calling it? I don't.
Yeah, they call it
I'm
the
probably
master.
butchering the name of it,
No,
but
no.
So it really gives you good tools, and there's like, you know, there's experts and engineers and all these people that are involved. And so you really can actually like put together a pretty good plan, you know, of like a rain garden or a native plant garden that you could put in your yard. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there. And Katie, I'm sure we could maybe follow up with some links and stuff to people.
Kathleen put the link in the chat right now.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Washtenaw.org/647/rain gardens. Thanks, Kathleen. So yeah.
And then there's the next question is, how is stormwater runoff monitored and regulation is enforced, especially when the source cannot be identified?
Well, that is through the MS4 permits, and Kathleen and Laura, you guys are probably more specialized in the MS4 permit field, but it is regulated. So when a city discharges stormwater, the MS4 permit has all kinds of regulations that they have to be following. And then every so often, cities are audited by the state, and they have to present to the state all of the actions that they've been taking to keep their stormwater, you know, not clean, but up to the standards of the state before it gets discharged.
Yep. And so for Southeast Michigan, really I'd say the majority of the southern half of the Lower Peninsula, they are required to obtain an MS4 or a stormwater permit. Similarly, like your industrial complexes, are required to obtain an industrial permit for, you know, how they're handling materials and chemicals and things like that. So for instance, the city of Rochester, we do periodic water sampling and monitoring. And so, you know, there's opportunities, like if you're out and about and you're walking your dog or whatever, you're driving by and you see, you know, like a hydraulic leak, or you see like gray water down a ditch, you know, you can call Eagle, you can call your local community and let them know about that. Coincidentally, just yesterday, there was someone that called in to Eagle, that is the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. They used to be MDEQ, but they've been known to change their name a dozen times over the last 10 years. But anyway, someone had called in, the city of Rochester. There was the plow that you put in the front of the truck and right in front of the postal office there in downtown Rochester. It was leaking hydraulic fluid, and somebody just happened to be walking by and noticed that. And the post office staff had put some oil dry down and things like that to try to contain it. But that resident walking by thought that it was an issue, so they called Eagle right away. Eagle then in turn reached out to us, and we went out and, you know, talked to the staff or whatever. So so there's a lot of more awareness of what's going on in the state of Michigan. They do periodic inspections at industrial complexes, and they do periodic inspections in the communities as well. So next question is there an existing cleanup group active on the Northwest? I don't know if that means Northwest portion of the state or exactly what that means, but.
Well, we have, so our cleanup groups, we don't have specific groups for Weekly Clean. Weekly Clean goes out each week to different locations, and it's whomever would like to show up can show up. But for Clinton Cleanup, which takes place in September every year, people are able to get their own groups together, and then we can kind of sponsor their cleanup, where we provide cleanup supplies, and if you have t-shirts or snacks available, we provide that to help support that. So well, we also have groups too. So if you were really looking for a group to get paired up with, you could contact us and we could pair you up with a group, or you could start your own group. And that would be just emailing Kathleen at crwc.org. Put that in there.
I'm just going to pop in because the rest of his or her question was on the northwest of the Clinton River as it flows into Cass Lake, or as it enters Cass Lake.
Okay.
And actually there's a group of folks, they're pretty dedicated, like a paddling group. David Lerner is sort of the spearheader. He does a Clinton cleanup every year, as Katie said. And they usually start near the Red Bridge launch, or that's what everybody calls it, but it's actually called the Clinton River launch. It's at Airport and Elizabeth Lake Road, and people will paddle from there to Cass Lake, and they'll clean up trash out of the river as they paddle. Pretty dedicated. There are several Facebook paddling groups, and the best thing about our kayakers and our paddlers is because they love the river so much, they're usually picking up trash when they're out there, you know, recreating, and pretty dedicated to being stewards of the river as well as enjoying it. So I think they're called like river rats or something on Facebook if you are on social media, but we can try to dig that up and see if we can get you connected with people that regularly go out and do their own cleanups.
Next question, of all the green infrastructure options, does one give the most bang for the buck that a municipality can implement to make the most efficient use of taxpayer dollars?
That is a big question. I mean, you'd have to do a cost analysis. It would depend on the project. It would depend on the amount of stormwater. I think that is unique to each site, and definitely before a project, we would be going through all this, you know, cost analysis to see what makes sense, and then also the resources that the city has. There's just a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, and I'll add that, you know, like for instance, at Clinton Township, they've put in some green infrastructure improvements at their complex. And what really spearheaded that was their parking lot was in need of repair and rehabilitation. And so they a good portion of, they basically rehabilitated the entire parking lot, put in some curb cuts and tree islands. And I think portion of that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, but portion of that, if not all, is pervious pavement. So basically all that rainwater goes in, and then it has some like little rain gardens and things like that. And then they put in some native plants along their detention bond and things like that. So for a municipality, obviously, keeping things in budget, and budget's a big concern. So that would be my recommendation, is if you already have a project in mind, think of ways that you can implement green infrastructure into that. That's probably the most cost-effective thing to do, but it's really dependent on what the site is. Are there any flooding problems? Are there any issues with that particular area? And then you would look to see what types of green infrastructure could be implemented with that. So like with flooding, really in residential home areas too, rain gardens is really a great solution for that, because it takes all of that rainwater and then is able to infiltrate that a lot quicker. So next question. Road salt is such a nightmare. I know there are alternatives like beet juice and other natural plant juices. Wondering when we can get Road Commission, Oakland County, to use the alternatives on a mass scale, at least in neighborhoods and near wetlands and preserves. Highways might still need salt for safety, but my little lake community sure doesn't need it.
So there's a misconception that these alternative sources are actually better. And in some cases, they're not. They still contain like chlorides, and those still get washed into the water. So everything that I've learned has said the best practice is to find out how much salt you need for what surface you're doing. So more salt does not mean more melt. There's a certain amount of salt that will melt a certain amount of ice. And it is only effective between certain temperatures. So sometimes it doesn't quite make sense to put it down. So the number one thing is to find out the right amount and only apply the right amount as it's needed. And we also have to adjust our expectations and not think that our roads should be bare in the winter. I mean, slow down. There might be a little bit of slush out there. We have learned to expect this, and that's not right. But we do have the Salt Watch at the Clinton River Watershed Council. So we've started to incorporate chloride monitoring into our Adopt a Stream program. So when we send people out now to collect bugs in the water and check on water quality, we're also sending them with chloride testing strips. And that just started a little bit last year, and then this is going to be the first full year that it's rolled out. And it's in cooperation with the Isaac Walton League of America. They're located on the East Coast, but they're starting to gather chloride data from as many areas as they're able to, and they actually supplied us with those chloride tests. And so we will have that chloride data, but then we will also share that chloride data with them. And then this helps us to establish like a baseline. What's the chloride levels in our water right now? Because once chloride gets in there, you can't get rid of it. You can't, I don't know, there's nothing magic that's going to lower those levels. When it's there, it's there. So, so this is one step, but yeah, definitely less is more. Use less.
And as a consultant for a number of communities in the area, I do know that just due to the price of salt alone, they are looking at ways to minimize the use of salt, and they're making sure that they calibrate their trucks and vehicles regularly, and maybe focusing on, high sloped areas or intersections. Obviously, safety is going to be number one priority. They don't want anyone getting any accidents, anyone getting hurt, but they are looking at that, and they realize that, salt is an issue in our environment. And that is one thing that Eagle's really looking at as well. So, you know, you cannot, under the MS4 permit, you cannot, you know, be applying salt along the wetlands and our waterways. You can't be stocking snow right along a detention pond or rivers, lakes, and streams. So if you certainly know of any issues, you can reach out to us and reach out to your local community, reach out to Eagle if you know, if you've identified any issues. Let's see if I missed anything here. Why are houses built so close together if watershed is really important?
Because they're allowed to be, and it makes, you know what I mean? There's no, people do things until there's regulation. So it makes sense for builders to build homes close. Why wouldn't they? They're going to make more money. It's not regulated. But at least nowadays, they have to account for their stormwater displacement when they're building a community. They can't just build it and not have a plan for the stormwater. But yeah, I mean, it just takes education. Like the more people know and understand, and maybe homes being built close together isn't the problem. Maybe it's how we're dealing with stormwater, and maybe it's the pollutants and like the fertilizers we're using on our lawn. It could be a lot of things.
I would like to add that we're to keep bringing up this MS4 permit. So Eagle has recently enforced communities to and counties to adopt stormwater standards. So you'll see, you know, as time goes on, and then you're in you know, upcoming future, you're going to see more green infrastructure, you know, in you're going to see more of that in place because they're requiring, you know, businesses, if there's new development or redevelopment going on, that business owner or property manager is going to be responsible for properly taking care of that stormwater. So any stormwater that leaves that site, they have to, you know, either put in a rain garden or underground cistern or porous pavements or something like that. And same thing with the communities, that anytime they're putting in a new development or redevelopment, that they have to, that those green infrastructure BMPs that we talked about have to come into play. Let's see what else we got. Do we know which species are the best indicators for overuse of salt in a certain area? Which are the first to be impacted?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for being here. Mark's one of our really good volunteers.
Okay.
I watched a webinar about road salt, and I don't remember what species, Mark, but it was like a plant. Sometimes you can look at the plants and the vegetation along roadways, and they might look kind of, I don't know if burned up is the right word to use, but they were specifically saying like plants and trees that are planted near roads, and also grass too. And the pictures and examples that they had, it just looked kind of like singed or burned. So I would say vegetation would be a visual thing that you could look at, you know, without testing or like getting into the ecology or habitat of it, just looking at the vegetation along the roadways.
And then he also asked, is increased precipitation from climate change being factored into new stormwater standards?
I'm not making the new stormwater standards, but I do know that climate change is, we had a climate change workshop this past week, and other groups like us, so there is in Detroit, oh gosh, Kathleen, what are they called? Anyway, people are beginning to take into account what kinds of species are going to be able to survive in the projected climate, and all the climate models that they have. So like hot, wet, hot, dry, you know, all the different possibilities of direction that we can go with climate change point to us having rainier springs, more precipitation overall, and heavier precipitation events, more days above 90 degrees and fewer days below freezing. And so that means that the species that can survive here it's going to change a little bit over time. And so going forward, I know groups such as ours and some of the other local groups are taking this into consideration when implementing like native plantings or trying to get more tree canopy in cities. But as far as regulations, I don't make those, so I would think they are. I think it's on the state's radar, but Laura, do you know any? You might know more about that.
No, like I said, pretty much what you said. There's been a lot of discussion from a lot of local groups, SEMCOG, the various watershed councils, regarding climate change. But in that, no, there's been no specifics into, how the stormwater standards play into that. We all know that the more green infrastructure, the better, but I don't think, at least I haven't been privy to some of those discussions.
Mhm.
And then there's one comment here from Sally. We are installing 2 street side bioswales at our neighborhood park. Cost is $35,000, includes curb cut construction permits from Oakland County Township permits, engineering drawings, plant design drawings, plant, straw wattle, erosion control, etc. So that sounds good. Says money is coming from our neighborhood HOA fund. Permit and engineering design costs killed us, so we had to stretch the project out over a year. Yep, that's
Yeah, good
That's
effort
common.
though. Good job. That's yeah, that seems to be common with projects. Again, that's kind of the bummer, but that is what you were saying, Laura, about find something that you already had to redo anyway, like a parking lot that's already in disrepair or it already needs repairs. And then when you go in and make these repairs, you just do them in a smarter way. But that's not to say it's not expensive and, all this stuff. It takes a lot of effort. It really does.
Mm-hmm. And there are grants available too. I know, for instance, the city of Rochester, they're part of the Water Towns program, and they receive some grant monies to do some improvements. So if you live in a community where you think there might be some opportunities, you could definitely reach out to, the municipal managers and make sure that they're aware of these opportunities. That's all I can see. I don't know if I'm missing anything. I think I got everything. Any other last minute questions, anybody? You can just unmute yourself if you like. If you want to just talk directly.
No, thank you. I really appreciate this. Thank you for taking the time to educate us on this stuff.
Thanks for attending. Alright. Well, thanks, Laura, for helping out so much. And
No, my pleasure.
Kathleen, your input was invaluable, just added so much. And I appreciate the co-hosting because it's tough to look at the chat and talk at the same time.
Sorry, I'll just make this quick. I could talk for an hour, but I'll try to be brief. Yeah, I really wish when I was researching like different communities who have really great programs, like Madison, Wisconsin has an amazing stormwater project going on, and they were actually giving incentives to people to put in rain gardens, like money back. And it's on their engineering website for the township, and it's huge. And I'm just wondering, how do we get more of these building codes and ordinances to even just briefly suggest implementing green infrastructure if you're going to do new construction? My husband comes from Germany, and there's a law where he comes from that any commercial building that's built has to have a green roof that takes up that amount of space. Things like that. How, can we get this stuff into the ordinances and the construction codes and the zoning codes? I really want to push that if somehow.
I found some example ordinances on the EPA's website, and then maybe you'd be able to get it passed on a city level. You know, I'm thinking a city level might be the easiest way to go at first, and then maybe the state will catch on after that, but it might be like a case by case, you know, city by city thing. And I'm trying to remember.
Can add like a little caveat. I think there are some municipalities in our watershed that are looking into a stormwater utility, which is essentially a reduction in your water bill if you mitigate your stormwater on your own property. So if you have a rain barrel or a rain garden or a bioswale or something that is going to capture the stormwater and keep it in your property or your designated area, I think Royal Oak was exploring implementing something like that. And there are other states and other communities that are farther ahead than Michigan, but it's definitely something it's on the radar of communities because it's a good way to incentivize homeowners doing this because, as you know, it's not cheap to put that infrastructure in, whether it's green infrastructure or gray infrastructure or a mix of both of it. But if I think that communities are realizing if they make an incentive for homeowners like a stormwater utility, they'll be able to encourage something like that. And education's a big part of it too, because a lot of the general population doesn't really know about stormwater or how it affects water quality or how they contribute to it. So we educate people about how they do and then different solutions for how they can keep it on site.
I'm really close to approaching some fellow township officials and after I do some more research of like a proposal for this kind of thing to give some more incentives to people. So thank you.
Keep up the good work. I know it's like takes a while for it to be rewarding, right?
Well, we had a massive the summer I moved into our home on this small lake. We had a fish kill because they had been treating the lake with algicides, and it was a massive die-off, 90-degree weather. It was so depressing, and so I just took it and ran with it. And so now we're doing these bioswales to start filtering some of the crap that runs off the streets, you know, and fertilizer. So much fertilizer. Oh, why? Okay. I gotta go tuck my kids in, but thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We'll
Roberta, yes, we can send this recording to everybody. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that was it.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't leave, Katie. I know I told you that I was going to leave, but you were just so I couldn't. I was like, I can't. It's just amazing job. So yeah.
Well, you guys made it the best because there's always, you know, the more people, the more answers you have. So it's good. Dream team. All right. See you guys later.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye. Have a good night.